Without a doubt, Witcher 3 was my favorite game of 2015, and the brand new expansion Blood and Wine is finally released. However, this is the final expansion for Witcher 3, so does it bring glory to one of the best games of the modern age, or does it diminish the legacy of an all-time classic? Blood and Wine is much more than just a typical DLC that you see in a lot of modern releases. It truly is an expansion to the already amazing Witcher 3. It brings a whole new area, a quite large area in Toussaint for you to explore with a big, long main story that actually takes longer to complete than a lot of other major AAA titles that are released nowadays. The developers do a great job with this expansion of allowing you to approach it from a few different ways. You can either start up an old save that you already have from playing through the game, and as long as you've completed past a certain part of the story, you'll automatically have the brand new mission at it so that you can get into the expansion, or you can play the expansion standalone with an already kind of default created character and be able to jump into it that way. It starts off like almost all side quests in Witcher 3. You pull a notification off of the bulletin board and then you're off to a small settlement, stopping some bandits, and then you're thrust into this whole new area. And as soon as you arrive, it feels different than previous areas that you've already explored. The colors and just the overall landscape seem different than the areas that we've already explored in Witcher 3 so far. While I don't want to get into too much spoiler territory with the plot for this DLC, I will say that there is blood and wine, as well as vampires and even some dark fairy tales that is thrown in. Overall, this is not only one of my favorite expansions, it actually is better than some of the other major side quests or main missions in the main game of Witcher 3. It is very plot heavy with a lot of dialogue that happens amongst the characters, which I actually vastly enjoyed. I love the voice acting and characters in the Witcher universe, and it's plenty more of that in Blood and Wine that you got in the other areas of Witcher 3, and it's just fantastic. I absolutely loved the story that was told throughout the course of Blood and Wine. If you just focus on the main story of Blood and Wine, it took me at least 7.5, 8 hours in order to play all the way through that. But then there's a whole lot of extra side content that's thrown into this new area. Not only do you have a nice large map for you to explore for this new area of Witcher 3, but you also have new Witcher contracts for all kinds of new monsters. They throw a bunch of new monsters that you're going to have to battle throughout the main plot, and you'll discover along your journey, but there's also new Witcher contracts, which are easily one of the funnest, if not the best, side quests that are available in Witcher 3. There's a bunch of those added here, as well as new Gwent cards for you to collect. If you're a big fan of Gwent, there's a whole bunch of new cards that are thrown into the mix for you to gather and add to your deck, and plenty of new people to battle. You also have a Colosseum with a night tournament that you'll be able to enter and earn some perks for doing so, and there's plenty of more armor and other swords and weaponry that is thrown in that you'll be able to find and gather and to be able to forge your new equipment. So by the time you make it back to the main area of Witcher 3, you'll have a whole new set of equipment and you'll be able to absolutely destroy anything that's going to get in your way. Blood and Wine's recommended level is to start off at 34, but trust me, once you get into Blood and Wine, you will be seeing much tougher creatures. It won't be long before you're seeing and battling monsters that are in their mid to upper 40s by the time you get through things. Overall, it is pretty difficult at times, and there's a couple of battles throughout the main story alone where you're just being surrounded by either bandits or monsters. Without going into too much spoilers, these are really enjoyable and tough fights. If you love the swordplay in Witcher 3, there is plenty of this, along with all the story and dialogue. So don't think that it's just plot heavy, you're also going to get plenty of action as well when it comes to Blood and Wine. And in fact, while I won't spoil it or say exactly what is involved with it, I will say that the boss fight that concludes the main plot of Blood and Wine is absolutely one of my favorite bosses, if not my absolute favorite monster encounter in the entire game. It is just an overall great expansion, from the combat to the story and plot and all the extra side activities that you're going to be getting throughout the course of Blood and Wine. Since it had been a while since I actually played through Witcher 3, I had a lot of downloads I had to do for the updates and just getting the expansion itself, so be prepared if you haven't played Witcher 3 since the beginning and you didn't go through the last expansion, you're going to have a lot of downloading just to be able to jump in here, but it is well worth that download time, and unfortunately the load times in the game are just as bad as they've always been. One of my biggest gripes about Witcher 3 is just the loading is really long, and I really wish for some of the patches they would have sped things up a bit, but since the game is just so amazing, it's not the worst. I guess it's worth the wait, you could say. Speaking of patches and all, I didn't really run into any major glitches or bugs throughout the course of my playthrough of Blood and Wine. It didn't crash on me. I did have a few weird pop-in and graphical things here and there. In fact, there was one time in a cutscene, birds just kept kind of popping in randomly, as well as a character's walk cycle when I was following them was completely broken. They were just kind of stutter-stepping all around until eventually I got through that particular area. But honestly, minor annoyances, if anything, and definitely didn't take away from my experience. If you didn't get it along with the Season Pass, Blood and Wine is $19.99 by itself, and you're getting so much content here, with the main plot taking at least 7 to 8 hours by itself, and then you throw in all the new Witcher contracts and side content, you're definitely probably doubling that time at least. There is a lot for you to play through with Blood and Wine, and in fact, it's longer than a lot of other major games that I've even played recently. So yes, it is a relatively expensive DLC, but you're pretty much getting a whole game contained within that $19.99. Overall, Witcher 3 was my favorite game of last year, as well as my favorite game of this console generation by far, and Blood and Wine just makes that same experience even better. It's the same great combat, just with some new stuff for you to tackle. If you love the gameplay and storytelling of Witcher 3, you're going to absolutely love Blood and Wine. In fact, the main story I think is even better than some of the main stories in Witcher 3, and that's really saying something because they're so extremely well told throughout the course of the main game. If you're going to get one expansion or one DLC for any major title that you're a fan of, Blood and Wine is definitely the one that you're going to want to check out. It is available for $19.99 on all the platforms that Witcher 3 is available for, and I'm going to be giving it, just like I would have given Witcher 3, a 9 out of 10. It is one of the best expansions I play for a game in a modern console. So many times DLCs miss the mark and just don't have enough content there for what you end up paying for. But Blood and Wine, that's not the case. But anyway guys, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoy.